Hey everybody, Kerzac here again in my backyard to bring you another review, and today I am reviewing the Transformers War for Cybertron Siege Voyager class Megatron. Now, if you know anything about Siege Megatron mold, you know there's like, off the top of my head, I can think of like 5 different versions of this figure that's already come out. You know, we have this one, the normal Siege Megatron. We have the 35th anniversary one, which is exactly the same, just with paint to match the to match his more G1, almost Transformers Devastation style look with like the slight shine to it and everything. We have the Netflix version, which once again, same figure, but comes with 2 of the weaponizer characters, and he also comes in a paint job that makes him look, he looks like he got all messed up and blown up and got like, you know, explosion effects all over him, that kind of stuff. Then we have the Generation Select one, which is one that finally changed the paint scheme. He has a kind of camo green and white look to him with like the dark gray face and the white helmet and everything. And then finally we are getting the Earthrise version of this figure, which once again the actual mold of the robot's exactly the same. Even the can, from what I can tell, the can looks like it's going to be the same. The only difference being how this part works. Specifically this accessory, which is a gun sword that forms the front of the tank, is going to be very much different and looks kind of ridiculous, to be honest, because it's going to just have the cannon front. Instead of being like a transforming piece, it's going to have the cannon front and the sword just be one piece that flips around for the sword. And in tank mode it looks alright, but in robot mode it looks ridiculous. But now that we have all that out of the way, let's talk about this figure in particular. So this is the original release of the Siege Megatron, just a normal retail version, and he looks pretty nice if I'm being honest. On the front here we do have some yellow paint detail for the little headlights down here. You can see a little bit of yellow paint kind of specked away from mine. The front of the cannon here is actually really well painted. It's got silver all around the barrel here and some red right here for looking like it's charging up for a blast. Some silver detailing up here where the wiring is and a little bit of silver on the scope there. You do get some red paint right here and here. This is actually painted right here, this red part up here for the arms. And there is some kind of, I'm not what you would call it, but beige gunmetal for the tank sides that help break up the black. And along the bottom, you know, you have Megatron just kind of peeking out like, "Hi, how are you? I'm just hiding down here." So that's all fun and good. And then of course we get to the battle damage kind of siege gimmick, where, you know, you have these little gunmetal flakes all over the top here. It doesn't continue onto the cannon right now, it's only on the top of the turret here. There is a little bit of black paint right there too. And then we have the opposite with the black plastic here having some dark, like lighter gray color flakes all along the legs here and all along the front of the tank there. So he looks like he's actually been in a battle. I think for the Megatron in vehicle mode here, the whole gimmick of the damage look actually works for him a little bit. It's probably one of the better versions I've seen of it for Siege. As far as what the tank can do, it can of course roll. Doesn't roll super well, but it rolls alright. You just have ports right here and here on either side, as well as 2 ports on the back of the tank there. And you can still flip out the hands to use those for ports if you want. There are some more ports along the inside, but it's hard to use them, and the end of the barrel is of course a port. You also have the little spots, I'm not sure what you call these, but little ports for putting the little blast effects on them right here and here. There's one over here too. There's some here and there everywhere. The actual turret can turn around, and it does so pretty well. The gun can't raise up at all, unfortunately. It's just how it's plugged in. But if you do remove it, while you have a much stubbier looking cannon, you can actually have it articulate up and point upward. Granted, it's separated from the rest of the turret, but you can articulate the cannon. You also just flip the whole turret around if you prefer and have not as stubby looking cannon, but still a little bit smaller, and have it articulate up and down a little bit. What I personally do is I raise this whole piece up a little bit, flip the cannon around the side, and now here we have a pretty decent look, still a pretty decent looking tank. While it's not as well painted, the cannon looks pretty nice still, and it actually does have a pretty good articulation. It's not only can the cannon move, but now the whole turret, being the arm section, can actually use the shoulder joints to aim upward. So I think that looks pretty good, and it can still turn around. So if you kind of just ignore this piece altogether and flip the cannon around, you actually have a really nicely articulated tank. And it still looks like, well, like a tank. But, you know, we'll get back to the official configuration. But we are going to move on to transformation, so you're just going to leave this piece off and set it to the side. And for tank mode, it's usually best just to go and start with legs, so you're going to flatten this piece out. flip out the heels, like so. Come up here to the waist, and the legs are actually tabbed in right here. Tabbed in pretty tightly, as you can hear. The inside part of the thighs will actually flip out, like that, like little panels. And the reason for that is so you can actually fold out the legs from the inside. As you can see, they rotate outward. And then that lets you use the hinge to straighten them out, and you can fold that piece back up. Once again, just kind of turn the whole piece around. It flips that out. Use the hinge to straighten the leg and fold that back up. Then you're just want to take the whole waist, flip it around so it's facing forward. And that lets you stand up your Megatron. Bring this on up. This part is where it gets a little bit tricky, as you kind of got to do both up here and the back with the turret at the simultaneously. So start with the turret, split it open. You're going to want to leave the cannon on this side, like that. You can also just remove the cannon altogether. It is just a separate piece, but you can actually transform it with the cannon still in place. Then you're going to come to the sides here, untab the sides of the front of the tank, flip that panel up, and grab the whole panel, and the sides of the front of the tank should come with it. Megatron's head will come out in the hinge. You can pull that whole piece out. These parts will actually fold inward, and these tabs go into these tab holes right there. As you can see, it just folds in like that, and folds in like that. While you have it up like this, you can go ahead and bring the arms in, and they fold and tuck in right behind the front of the chest and tab in place. Just squeeze those in there. This whole piece folds down to form the backpack, and as you do, it straightens the head into place. You'll have to adjust the panel the head's sitting on. It doesn't really sit in place anywhere, but it is a pretty stiff hinge, so it's not going to go anywhere either once you have it where you want it. Go ahead and flip the cannon around. Flip out the hands. And there you go. You have your Siege Megatron in his robot mode. And Siege Megatron's a very good looking Megatron. I previously had the Titans Return Megatron. I don't remember if I did a review of him or not. But at the time I felt like that was a really good representation of a Generation / Chug style Megatron. But this one just nearly knocks out of the park. It's got a few flaws that bug me quite a bit, but he is so close to being just the perfect Siege Megatron. Oh, I missed one transformation step. These pieces right here just falling down. Just kind of cleans up the robot mode a little bit. Now I'm appreciative of that. But yeah, he looks very good just to kind of get a close-up look. The head looks really nice, very G1 Megatron, very fierce looking. Just exactly what you want for your Decepticon leader. He has all this detail, all the G1 details you'd expect. Despite him transforming into a tank, he does look very much like the G1 gun Megatron through and through. Just for a good comparison of the way, here he is next to the Earthrise Thundercracker, who is of course much smaller than the, not much smaller, but he's definitely a head shorter than the Siege Megatron here. Which is funny because I did remember people complaining about Siege Megatron already being a smaller Voyager, and now we have even smaller Voyagers. So it's funny how things are going, yet those are selling like hotcakes. Anyway, back to Megatron here. He does look pretty good though. You know, coming in, look at the face again. Face is done in silver with red for the eyes, a little bit black right there for the top of his helmet. You do have the Decepticon symbol right there. You do get some blue for the little crystal spark looking thing right here, and a smaller one there. Some yellow to fill in the chest right here. The yellow paint's a little off, stamped just slightly off center on mine. Some red right here. I do wish the red actually went along the sides, but it's just on the very front there. So a little bit lazy there. The arms do have a little bit of red paint right there, and some red up here still from the tank mode. Nothing on the legs really except for the sides there where that beige kind of gunmetal was at, and that gunmetal is used right here for the feet, just to break it up a little bit. And you can actually see some silver on the inside part of the tank treads, which does help blend them in pretty nicely with the gray. And it does look pretty good. And one neat detail is that in tank mode, this was the top of the turret, and you can see it has all this crazy detail, all these little circuitry, little bulb looking things, all kinds of cool stuff. Looking very similar to the side of the gun here. But when you flip around for his robot mode, it's actually a very smooth, almost G1-esque cannon that has just enough detail to break it all up. Like the little exhaust port here, you have some lining detail right there. Nothing fancy, but also still pretty nice. And of course, he does have the battle damage, which you have a bunch of it splattered across the chest here, and it carried over from the arms and on the legs from the tank mode. So that's all nice. As far as complaints go, I actually don't like the battle damage. There is also a little bit on this helmet. I just, on the arm, on the legs, it doesn't really bother much. I actually like how it looks on the legs, but on the arms, on the chest, it just, I don't know, it doesn't make me think of battle damage. It makes me look like I haven't cleaned my figure in a little bit. It looks like there's dust, like clumps of dust just hanging on it or something. It's just, it's something that personally bothers me and I'm not a fan of it. I actually have the 35th anniversary version on the way, and I think I'm going to like that one a lot better. The hands are off center. For anybody who remembers Anime Lockdown, how his hand stuck out a little bit, it's not quite that bad because Anime Lockdown had some weird hooked hand that was like that. But it's still just not straight. I'm not sure why Hasbro would do this. It just doesn't look good. I'm almost tempted to shave off these tabs right here, because those are the only things that are stopping his hands from actually being flat, from what I can tell. It's the only thing that's really stopping them from just sitting flat against his arm. So I don't know. I'm not sure why they would put that tab there specifically and have it actually block his arms from looking quite right. Because when I'm just standing there, I don't know. His hands being bent inward just looks so odd. It's just something that personally bothers me, but it's something that I always notice with this figure, and it always bothers me. But other than that, it's not too bad, though. You know, he has a pretty neat backpack, and it's all compact, and it's just one solid piece, pretty much, so you don't have to worry about the backpack coming unfolded and falling everywhere. The legs are pretty solid. You know, they are hollow to an extent with a little hole there, but these pieces folding in actually help with that quite a bit. So, unlike a lot of his Siege and Earthrise counterparts, he doesn't suffer from the hollowness quite as much. And he does, like I said, look pretty good. He also has this weapon, as I mentioned earlier. You can have him hold it as the gun if you want, like so, with the big sword pieces sticking out. You can also peg it to the back here, if you want to kind of give him the G1 cannon staying up from the shoulder look. It can also still plug into the main cannon here, if you can work with the sword pieces. Personally, if you're going to do that, I take the pieces and fold them forward like this, and have them twist out like that, because these are on hinges. If you're going to do the big, silly deluxe cannon, you can do it like that. Way too big for my personal taste, but still usable. As I mentioned, you can hold it, you can plug it into any of their ports, but the sword pieces just stick off. If you're going to want to use this as a gun, you're just going to, these actually come off on the hinge right here. Just slide right out because they are mushroom pegged in. But the reason they have these big pieces sticking off is that they actually form Megatron's sword. So you just fold the pieces in over around the cannon, make sure the tabs line up like they should up here, and there you have the sword. Goes in his hand like that. And from what I understand, the original Japanese version of G1 Megatron came with a sword that has a similar shape to this. I think it was like a black sword that had kind of this double-edged look to it. And it looks alright. It looks like a decent sword, just has a gun sticking in the middle of it. It's like, you either have a gun that has huge chunks of sword sticking off, or you have a sword that has a big bulge from the cannon right in the middle of it. I do think the sword mode works better than the cannon mode, but personally, I personally just kind of set this aside, or just have it in the sword mode. Or if you're going to use it for the gun, I recommend just taking the sword pieces off altogether and just leave just the cannon as a decent looking handheld weapon. But it's not the worst thing either. That's really the only major flaws with that stuff, is that the weapon looks a little bit silly and the hinges on the hands bother me some. But once again, that's probably all mainly personal stuff. And as I mentioned, this cannon is also removable if you want. You can take it off, plug it into any of your plugs, and give him an over-the-shoulder cannon like that. You can put it in his hand, but I just personally leave it on the arm like so. So all that's left is articulation. Head is ball jointed, so it can look all around, it can look up and down a little bit. It is ball jointed on the back though, so when you turn it, it can look a little bit odd because it's not twisting in the center, it's twisting along the back. So the head can look a little off center in some poses, especially if you're looking at his neck. So that might bother you, doesn't bother me too much, but it's something I did notice. Arms are universal, so you can go all around, you can go outward. You do get a swivel, but the can might get in the way, so I'll show you that over there. You do get an elbow joint. The hands have no articulation other than just the hinge right here. Nothing at the wrist or anything. You can move the arms outward and you do get the waist, but it might bump into the backpack a little bit, so. Universal hips, go forward and go back about that far. They can go back further if you get the backpack out of the way. Oh, backpack's got readjusted. They can go out that far outward. You can swivel. Knee joint, and there is no forward and back movement for the legs really, especially with the heel joint out. But it does have the tilt, but you gotta click it. It's like it's not a ratchet, it's just like a piece you gotta click the plastic in. And then you can see the plastic, because the tilt's actually attached to this piece right here. It can be kind of difficult to use at times, but you can get going. You can have him actually have his legs open and splayed out a little bit more. The hardest part is getting him clicked back in though, because this one clicks in just fine, but his right leg for me, it can be really tricky to kind of get it clicked all the way back in. As you can see, I'm actually having a little bit of trouble. What I often have to do in order to click his leg back in place properly is actually have to slide the foot off, click it back in place, and then slide the foot back on, like so. He also does have a loose knee joint right here. Like this knee is actually pretty tight. As you can see, it's only letting the figure fall back a little bit. When I grab this leg though, it falls right back. So you're a very articulate, good-looking representation of Megatron, I think. Is he the best? No, not really. He's not the greatest, but he is a very, very nice Megatron, I think. You know, he has decent articulation. He's got really nice paint, as long as you don't mind the kind of battle splatter, as I'm calling it. He has the cannon. It goes on his arm perfectly, and he has a really nice looking head sculpt, and it all looks pretty good. If you don't like the whole battle splatter thing, you know, hunt down the 35th anniversary version. If you know, there's also other versions to find. If you're a fan of the Netflix show, you can get the Netflix version. There's the Generation Select, or you can wait for the Earthrise one if you want a sword that looks even worse than this one. So that's all up to you. So this has been Kerzac. I hope you enjoyed this review, and hope you have a great day. Take care.